Hello, and welcome to History Bytes. Today, we're talking about the Battle of Monte Cassino, also known as the Battle of Rome, from 1944 during World War II. Let's get some background. The year is 1944 during the Second World War, and the Allies launched Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily, an island in the Mediterranean held by large German ally, Fascist Italy. The Allies had been pushing up Italy to threaten the southern flank of Germany and knock out Italy from the war. The last stand position defending the city of Rome itself was the so-called Gustav Line, which held the immense abbey of Monte Cassino, founded in 529 AD, which had so far been avoided by the Germans due to its historical significance. The Allied forces the Germans were facing were comprised of a multinational army, the American Fifth Army and the British Eighth Army, with soldiers from the US, the UK, India, France, Canada, New Zealand, South Africa, Italy itself, and a large Polish force. The Germans were defending Monte Cassino themselves using the 10th Army that was desperately thrown together in 1943, which contained infantry, tanks, and Luftwaffe combined forces. Both the Allies and the Axis saw Rome as vitally important positions for morale. If the Germans held Rome, it might convince the Italians to remain loyal to the Germans, but for the Allies, it would be a greatly needed boost in morale to take the Eternal City, as well as convince the Italian population that the Allies are making headway in their mission to liberate Italy. The build-up. The commander-in-chief of the Allied armies in Italy was General Sir Harold Alexander, who was advancing up both sides of Italy to avoid the difficult fighting in the mountainous spine of Italy. The American forces had been suffering immensely after landing at Salerno in September of 1943 on the western side of Italy, and Montgomery's 8th Army was battling up the Adriatic coast in the east. By January 1944, both forces had begun to converge south of Rome near Cassino, where the Germans had been building powerful defences that go hand in hand with the impressive natural defences. The fortifications would have been nearly impenetrable if it weren't for the 1st Canadian Division, who bravely pushed through the German lines and breached the fortifications, forcing the Germans to redesign their line at the last minute. The most powerful site on the line, however, was the Monte Cassino Abbey. Despite the Abbey's excellent defensive position, the German Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, in command of the Axis forces in Italy, agreed to leave the Abbey untouched and not include it in defensive positions, and he informed both the Vatican and the Allies as such. The Allies were suspicious of this, however, and sent recon planes to look at the Abbey. The planes reported they saw German troops inside the monastery, and while this was not confirmed, the monastery was destroyed. After it was destroyed, it was occupied for certain by German paratroopers, who were even better protected than before, as the rubble provided better cover than the monastery ever could have. It's a similar story to Stalingrad in the east, where the Germans' heavy bombing of the city reduced it to rubble, making it easy to defend, only this time it was the Americans doing the bombing. The First Battle. The first wave of the attack was a British assault, drawing Kesselring's reserves away from the areas where the main Allied attacks would come. This is important, because if the Allies broke through the line, the German reserves that would be caught up fighting the British would be unable to counterattack the larger American force later on. In practice, however, during the assault, both the British and the Germans took significant losses. On sunset, the 20th of January, the second main assault came. The American 36th Division of 2nd Corps pushed hard in the centre of the line, but disaster struck. As the infantry crossed the Gari River, the Allied tanks were unable to follow, meaning the American infantry was mercilessly cut down by German tanks and self-propelled guns. Barely any Americans survived to be able to retreat. Next, the Americans tried north of Cassino, with the French colonial forces holding their right flank, and they made slow and costly progress. Eventually, the French-Moroccan troops were forced to hold against the well-trained and defended German 5th Mountain Division. On the 11th of February, the American 2nd Corps was exhausted after over 2 weeks of brutal fighting and were withdrawn, but not without the respect of the entire world, and to this day, the 34th Division's mountain assaults is seen as one of the bravest and finest feats of the 20th century. Second Battle. This was when the bombing of the monastery took place, which was seen as a colossal error from most onlookers. The bombing itself was sloppy, with 90% of the bombs dropped, not actually hitting the monastery, and accidentally killing both Axis troops, Allies troops, and civilians accidentally. One of the American bombs nearly killed their own general, with one of the bombs landing just a few metres from where General Mark Clark was doing his paperwork. No German soldiers were even using the abbey for military purpose, and those killed in the abbey were civilians taking shelter and monks. After the destruction, the German 1st Parachute Division moved in and turned the abbey into a fortress, causing huge problems for the Allies. The 7th Indian Infantry Brigade attempted an assault on the abbey but suffered huge casualties. English troops of the Royal Sussex Brigade tried next, without artillery support, and fought in brutal hand-to-hand fighting at midnight, losing half their men and nearly all their officers. The main assault came from specialist Gurkha mountain troops, who saw the Italian mountains as mere hills, and together with a group of Indian troops tried to break through the German lines. The attack failed, however, and they were pulled back. The fearsome 28th Maori Battalion concluded the second battle and saw some success, but the presence of German armour eventually forced the New Zealanders to pull back, but not without dealing heavy damage to German troops and spreading panic among the German commanders. The third battle. The New Zealanders had now come into their own and were creeping forward again on the 15th of March, this time with artillery support and extra equipment, as well as the potential for Indian support and British tanks. Gurkhas and New Zealanders pushed forward without their armoured support, as the British tanks had been knocked out on their way to help, and the soldiers fought house by house, taking each hill slowly. After a week, the generals decided that the Indians and New Zealanders had sacrificed enough and were exhausted, and so they were told to wait for relief from a full push from all forces. The German paratroopers had taken heavy losses at the hands of the New Zealanders and Indians, but still they held. The fourth battle. This final attack was decided to be just before D-Day to prevent the Germans being able to have reserves to fight in France. The Americans, British, Canadians, French Moroccans and Polish were all prepared to lead an immense assault along a 20-mile long front. At 11 PM on the 11th of May, the assault opened with artillery and every Allied force attacked, with the Canadians' tanks replacing the positions the New Zealanders had held. By the afternoon, the pressure had started to show on the German lines, with their right flank collapsing in the wake of a furious Polish assault. After days of brutal fighting, the British and Polish made great breakthroughs. On the 15th, the British 78th Division suddenly overtook the bridgehead divisions and cut Cassino off from German support. Just 48 hours later, the Polish decided to end the battle once and for all, and clambered through mines and mortar fire to the monastery. The Polish troops were so exhausted they could barely climb the final 100 metres to raise the Polish flag above the abbey. The British soon joined them and raised a Union Jack beside the Polish flag in solidarity. The Allies had finally broken through and had Rome in their grasp. The aftermath. The battle for Monte Cassino had seen huge losses for the Allies, but every Allied nation proved itself to be made of heroes, with soldiers from the US, UK, Canada, New Zealand and Poland being eternally recognised for their bravery. Despite the costly blunder of the destruction of the abbey, the forces kept pushing and took Rome, confirming the demise of fascist Italy. The resources Germany would have to flood into Italy to defend would make the lives of the soldiers on D-Day in France, as well as Operation Bagration in the Soviet Union, much easier. The battle was costly, but was crucial for the winning of the war. I hope you enjoyed today's episode on the Battle of Monte Cassino. If you learned something new, press like and subscribe if you're new. Leave a comment on what you thought, and I'll see you next time.